Greetings, booktubers. Welcome back to Grammaticus Books. And today at Grammaticus Books, we're going to talk about the 1995 novel by Christopher Priest called The Prestige. Now, before I get into this book, and I'm going to touch a little bit on the movie that came out in 2006, directed by Christopher Nolan. But before I get into it, I need to give credit where credit is due. This book was brought to my attention by Richard over on Vintage SF. On his fantastic channel, he did a superb review of this book and brought the book to my attention. I'd seen the movie when it came out back in 2006 in the movie theater, but at that time I didn't realize it was based off of a book. I'd forgotten completely about it. And then Richard did this great review on it and brought it to my attention. I said, I've got to go out, I've got to get that book and read it, which I've done. And now I'm going to give you my version, my review of it here on the channel. But I highly encourage you to go over and check out Richard's review as well. And I'll link his video down in the comments section below. So The Prestige, 1995, it was awarded the World Fantasy Award for the Best Novel of 1995. And it's an excellent book that follows two stage magicians at turn of the century England who get involved in a feud. And the two magicians are Alfred Borden and Rupert Ange. And they become consumed with trying to outdo each other, with trying to effect tricks that give them the most prestige. And the title of the book, The Prestige, refers to the final act in the magician's trick on stage. You have the setup where he lays out what is going to happen with the trick. You have the performance where he goes in and he performs his drama. He builds the tension for the trick. And then you have the prestige when the trick is revealed. And the title of the book refers to that last stage, the prestige, when it is revealed, the trick is revealed, which is also how the book is set up. Prestige could, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, I think it could also refer to the feud that is driving these two stage magicians, Alfred Borden and Rupert Ange, and that they want the prestige. They both want to be the most prestigious magician in all of England there at turn of the century Victorian England, and they are attempting to outdo each other, and that is what's driving this feud of theirs. That and a couple of other things. The book is very well written, it's very well structured, and it uses a method of telling the same story, the same sequence of events, going over that same storyline, but from multiple different perspectives. As you go through each narrator's version of events, you start to realize that the narrators themselves become increasingly unreliable as to their version of the events and what has actually happened as the story builds and unfolds through these multiple tellings of the same series of events. The story, I should say, the feud that these two engage in is so intense that it not only consumes the lives of both Alfred Borden and Rupert Ange, but it echoes down through the generations to their descendants, and their descendants carry on the feud. And in fact, the story begins in modern times with two descendants of Alfred Borden and Rupert Ange, and that's where the story kicks off. And then you get these flashbacks via these diaries that go back and tell you these multiple versions of events, of the same sequence of events. Now, I'm going to tell you there are a couple of pet peeves that I have when I'm reading stories, and my two biggest pet peeves I have are flashbacks and dream sequences. And this entire story is constructed primarily of flashbacks. However, Christopher Priest executes it very adroitly. He's very skilled with it, and it's necessary to put it up in this format in order to tell the story in the manner in which he wants to tell it and show that it had effects. This ongoing feud has had effects right up to modern times. And then it's in modern times at the end of the book that you get his prestige in the book where you have this reveal. And it's wonderfully written. It's an excellent book. The writing quality is just top notch. And each person's story as they go through these events just pulls you in, becomes mesmerizing, and draws you into this story and makes you want to read more. And the characters that he develops via these diaries are really wonderfully fleshed out. They're great characters. You become involved in them. And as the story goes forward, you start to learn more about their flaws and the mistakes that they've made from the other narrators' perspectives and through their diaries, as you learn about what they have done and some of the things that they may have hidden or withheld out of their narration from their diary that are revealed in the other diaries. So the feud between the two magicians culminates over a single trick that gets perfected first by Alfred Borden, and it's called the Transported Man. And it's an illusion where Alfred Borden seemingly transports himself instantaneously from one side of the stage to the other side of the stage. And it drives Rupert Ange crazy because he can't figure out how Alfred Borden is doing it. And then Rupert Ange himself devises a way to do the same trick, but using a different methodology. And he names his trick In a Flash. And his part of this trick makes use of the scientist Nikola Tesla. And Tesla helps him come up with a scientific way in order for him to execute the same trick. So the story that Christopher Priest is writing here, it starts off as a period drama set in Victorian England with this backdrop of Victorian era magic stage shows in London and across the rest of the nation. And it's a wonderful period drama that he's constructing here in the first part of the book, in the setup. And then in the performance, it slowly metamorphosizes into a science fiction psychological thriller that really starts to build the tension in the book, just like a stage show, a stage trick would. And then at the end of the book, he brings it back to modern times in order to reveal the prestige. And at that point, it becomes a full-on horror story with a horror story conclusion to it that is really great. I enjoyed it quite a bit. So that is the book. It's well executed. I highly recommend it. I had two small critiques of the book. One was pacing. At times, the pacing does bog down a bit. When you're reading these diary entries, and the first diary entry is, on January 10th, I woke up and had a bowl of porridge, went to work, came back, brushed my teeth, and went to bed. January 11th, woke up, had fried toast with cheese on it, then went to work and came back and went to bed. And that's a bit of an exaggeration. So for me, at times, I thought it did bog down a little bit in that device, those diaries. The other pet peeve I have with it is some of the science upon which the In a Flash trick is based is pretty ridiculous. It is science fiction, I get that, but even for science fiction, it's kind of ridiculous. And while I was reading the book, and as I'm reading about these tricks, as I'm reading about the transported man, and then Ange coming up with the In a Flash, and he's describing his process for In a Flash, and it seemed like there was just a gigantic plot hole in this book. I mean, I'm talking a plot hole big enough that you could have driven a semi through, that I thought was going to destroy the book until it got to the prestige at the end of the book, and it comes back into modern times, and the plot hole actually becomes the mechanism, the lever for the horror aspect of it at the end of the book, and it's excellent. So what do I give this book overall? Overall, I give this book a solid 9 out of 10. I do recommend it. It's very well written. And there's a reason that Christopher Nolan picked it and made a movie out of it. So let's talk about the movie. The movie came out in 2006, but the rights to this movie were purchased back around 1999. 1999 was right after the movie American Beauty, directed by Mendes, came out, which won an Academy Award. And Mendes puts in a bid on the book in order to turn it into a movie, or his studio does, with him directing it. And then another studio also puts in a bid, but with a brand new director, that director being Christopher Nolan. So Christopher Priest looks at these bids and he goes, well, we have to go with Mendes. The guy just won an Academy Award. It's a no-brainer. And they relay that back to their agent. That information somehow makes it back to Christopher Nolan, and Christopher Nolan's wife, who's his producer, calls up Christopher Priest on the phone and says, don't do anything until you view a film clip that we're sending to you. We have it on a motorbike right now. We're driving it to your house. Hold off on any decisions until you watch this film clip. And he's absolutely just taken in by this directing and this filmography that Christopher Nolan has done. And he decides to take a chance on Christopher Nolan. He does have a little bit of a disagreement with how Nolan executed the ending and some of the things that Nolan was saying when he was filming the movie about the ending. But at the same time, I understand why Christopher Nolan put the ending in that he did. He changes the ending rather significantly, and he had to. You had to. There's no way that you could have filmed this in a 2-hour film and gotten everything that was in the book up on the screen. And so Christopher Nolan had to take a little bit of a shortcut. And in my opinion, the back half of his movie suffers a little bit from that, and it becomes very dark, much darker than the book, which is already dark in the back half of that book, and it becomes much more violent. And I actually prefer the book to the movie, not very surprisingly. And it was filmed very well. I enjoyed the film quite a bit, especially the first half of the film, but then I thought it kind of went slightly off the rails in the back half of that film. And the ending, which at that time I didn't know there was a book, I really didn't like the ending. I thought it got a little too grim, a little too macabre for my tastes. And reading the book, I enjoyed the book quite a bit more. But that's it. That's my take on the movie. That's my take on the book. I'd love to hear what yours is. If you read the book, if you saw the movie, let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. And with that, I'm going to say take care, be safe, and I'll catch you guys next time.